Welcome to Turkistan TV News. Below their lines, American corporations cancel Russia but remain silent on Uyghur genocide. Daily Caller News. Major American companies are suspending operations in Russia following the nation's invasion of Ukraine. All six of American companies that sponsored the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics have taken action against Russia, but none of those companies have altered their operations in People's Republic of China, despite evidence the nation is committing genocide against ethnic Uyghurs and other Turkic people. After a congressional hearing regarding Olympic sponsorship in May 2021, all of the American sponsors of the 2022 Winter Olympics except Mars Incorporated submitted statements to the congressional body justifying their Olympic sponsorship. Uyghurs declared the corporate world's hypocrisy in the interviews with the Daily Caller News Foundation. While major corporations responded to the invasion of Ukraine by changing and suspending their business operations in Russia, the six American corporate sponsors of 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics remain silent on the Uyghur genocide. Although Airbnb, Intel, Mars Incorporated, Visa, Coca-Cola, and Procter & Gamble, the only six American companies to sponsor the 2022 Winter Olympics, adjusted their business operations following the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. None of the companies have acknowledged the Uyghur genocide nor altered their business plans in the People's Republic of China. Recognition of Uyghur genocide at the hands of Chinese Communist Party has risen with mounting evidence of the situation, and over 200 human rights organizations and 8 governmental bodies, including Canada, the United States, Holland, the United Kingdom, Lithuania, Czech Republic, Belgium, and France, have declared that PRC is guilty of committing crimes against humanity, genocide, or both against ethnic Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples. Yet major American corporations remain silent on the issue, with some business leaders, such as Golden State Warriors owner Chamath Palihapitiya, having even voiced that former NBA player Anis Carter freedom characterized as an "I could care less" attitude toward the CCP's human rights abuses. Nobody cares about what's happening to Uyghurs, Palihapitiya said on the All In podcast in January 15th. You bring it up because you really care, and I think it's nice that you care. The rest of us don't care. I'm just telling you a very hard, ugly truth. All of the things I care about, yes, it's below my line. All of the American sponsors of 2022 Winter Olympics, except for Mars Incorporated, submitted statements to the Congressional Executive Commission on China in July 2021, defending their Olympic sponsorship and human rights track record, following a joint hearing concerning Olympic sponsorship held by congressional body and the Lentos Foundation in May 2021. Here's how 6 American sponsors of 2022 Winter Olympics justified their sponsorship, how they have reacted to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and what their current status is with regard to the PRC. On February 28, Airbnb CEO Brian Chesky announced in a tweet his company would be working with our hosts to house up to 100,000 refugees fleeing from Ukraine for free. Airbnb's revenues was around $6 billion in the last 12 months, according to CNBC, with the Bloomberg reporting the company had the best year in its history. Although it remains unclear precisely how much revenue Airbnb receives from a given global region, there is no doubt that the company has benefited from Chinese investors. In March 2017, the China Investment Corporation, CIC, supplied $100 million, a 10% stake, to Airbnb during funding rounds, Sky News reported at the time. The CIC is a CCP state-backed sovereign wealth fund, first used to supply $3 billion for Blackstone's historic 2007 IPO, according to Reuters report. Airbnb did not immediately respond to DCNF's request for comment. In July 2021, Airbnb submitted a written statement to the CACC in defense of its sponsorship of the Olympics and human rights record, saying our partnership is designed to support athletes, not any particular city or games. We recognize that our global footprint means we have and will continue to face complex and challenging issues worldwide, Airbnb said, although it did not mention Uyghurs or East Turkestan. On January 7, the CCC wrote to Chesky expressing concern that some of the Airbnbs listing in East Turkestan, so-called Xinjiang, are located on a land owned by the entity sanctioned by the United States Treasury Department, which was a quasi-military organization and directly involved in forced labor and possibly other human rights abuses. While Airbnb continues to maintain listing in East Turkestan, it has not publicly condemned the continuing genocide taking place there. It also continues to operate in a country whose laws require hosts to discriminate based on ethnicity, place of origin, or lack of passport, when the ability to obtain a passport can be impossible for people of some ethnic groups, the letter said. While Airbnb has stated that it's committed to anti-discrimination, it has also indicated that it's required to follow local laws and regulations in China, a requirement that inherently obliges to it engage in discrimination against Uyghurs, Tibetans, and other ethnic groups in China, the letter said. On March 3rd, Intel posted a statement on its website saying Intel condemns the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and we have suspended all shipments to customers in both Russia and Belarus. We have launched an employee donation and matching campaign through the Intel Foundation that has already raised over $1.2 million for relief efforts, the Intel statement said, and we are proud of work our teams in surrounding areas including Poland, Germany, and Romania are doing to aid refugees. Intel's revenue was $79 billion in last 12 months, according to CNBC, $21 billion of which were earned in China and Hong Kong, according to Statista. However, only $40 million of Intel's revenue was earned from its Russian market, according to T-Advisor. The DCNF reached out to Intel, but the spokesperson declined to comment. Citing a list of concerns, Intel received an F rating on the Victims of Communism's Corporate Complicity Scorecard report on February 3. The report analyzed Amazon, Apple, Dell, Facebook, GE, Google, Microsoft, and Intel on their exposure to China's military modernization, surveillance state, domestic securitization, and human rights violations. The study found Intel had an extensive production, research, and development footprint in China, featuring partnership with the government and military-tied entities. It additionally found that Intel maintained long-standing ties to the Chinese government, including research collaborations with the government research institutions, developing surveillance technologies, and elite-level relationship with the institutional players charged with implementing Beijing's military-civil fusion strategy. The study also found that Intel made investments in and alongside Chinese military civil fusion and surveillance relevant companies, and that the company's technology was potentially being incorporated into surveillance efforts in East Turkestan, so-called Xinjiang. In July 2021, Intel submitted a written statement to the CECC in defense of its sponsorship of the Olympics and human rights records. Rating Intel was proud to be a sponsor of Olympic Games and had a long-standing commitment to the corporate responsibility. We are aware of the determinations made by the United States Department of State regarding East Turkestan and the United States government's ban on the importation of certain products sourced from East Turkestan. Read Intel's letter. We have confirmed that Intel does not use any labor or source goods or services from East Turkestan, so-called Xinjiang region. On March 1st, Mars Incorporated issued a statement on its website saying we are appalled by what's happening in Ukraine and striving to provide our courageous Ukrainian associates with the support they need. Before adding that in addition to donating both food and money, Mars suspended social media, advertising, and new investments in Russia. Mars revenue was $40 billion in 2021, according to Forbes, with a confectionery manufacturer having $2 billion invested in Russia, according to The Hill. However, it remains unclear precisely how much revenue Mars receives from all global regions. Mars Incorporated did not immediately respond to DCNF's request for comment. Still, Mars has steadily increased its presence in PRC since 2016, when it partnered with Alibaba. This partnership was followed by a push by Mars into the PRC's pet food market, beginning with the plan to develop a $100 million pet food facility in Tianjin in 2019, and a partnership with the e-commerce company JD.com to develop a cat products in 2020. On March 5th, Visa posted a statement titled "Visa suspends all Russia operations" on its website, saying Visa will work with its clients and partners within Russia to cease all Visa transactions over the coming days. All transactions initiated with Visa cards issued in Russia will no longer work outside the country, and any Visa cards issued by financial institutions outside of Russia will no longer work within the Russian Federation. We are compelled to act following Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine and unacceptable events that we have witnessed, the Visa statement said. This war and ongoing threat to peace and stability demand will respond in line with our values. Visa's revenue was $25 billion in the last 12 months, according to CNBC, with $10 billion in revenue originating in the United States in fiscal year 2020, according to Wall Street's Zen.com report, which cited Visa's Securities and Exchange Commission filings. However, Visa's international market proportion was larger still, sitting just shy of $20 billion, according to the report. Visa didn't immediately respond to the DCNF's request for comment. In July 2021, Visa submitted a written statement to the CECC in defense of its sponsorship of the Olympics and human rights record, writing that the company was proud to be a long-standing supporter of the Olympic and Paralympic Games, before plugging Visa's work in promoting financial literacy programs in China, as well as Visa's partnership with the China Women's Development Foundation, which Visa described as providing comprehensive business skills training to help an estimated 5,000 women-led small businesses in connection with the Games. It's important to make clear that sponsors like Visa have no say in the country selected by the IOC to host the Games, Visa's letter read. It has been that way for the entirety of our 55-year partnership and remains that way today. Visa didn't mention Uyghurs in East Turkestan in its letter to Congress. On March 8, Coca-Cola announced that it would be suspending its business in Russia, which the BBC reported accounted for roughly 2% of its firm's operating revenue and income. Coca-Cola's revenue was $38 billion in the last 12 months, according to CNBC, with North America generating 34.1% of Coca-Cola's revenue, 17% of its business originating in Europe, including Russia, and 12.1% arising from the Asia-Pacific region, according to Statista. Coca-Cola did not immediately respond to DCNF's request for comment. Coca-Cola and several other major United States corporations were named as having suspected ties with forced labor in East Turkestan, so-called Xinjiang, according to CEC's report from March 11, 2020. In July 2021, Coca-Cola submitted a written statement to the CECC in defense of its sponsorship of the Olympics and human rights record, writing that the company was proud to be an Olympic sponsor and that the company's commitment to human rights was sincere and embedded in our culture and strategy. Coca-Cola didn't mention Uyghurs or East Turkestan, so-called Xinjiang, in its letter to Congress. In March 7, Procter & Gamble issued a statement on its website, saying we proactively suspended operations in Ukraine to help to protect our people locally. Our continued efforts range from evacuation assistance to financial and logistical support to provision of food, shelter, and essential products for P&G families, the statement said. The statement outlined Procter & Gamble's donations to refugee families and relief organizations. and it announced the discontinuation of new capital investments and suspension of media advertising and promotional activity in Russia. Procter & Gamble's revenue was $78 billion in last 12 months, according to CNBC, with North America accounting for $33 billion of Procter & Gamble's revenue. Europe, including Russia, generating $50.6 billion and PRC providing $6.4 billion in 2020, according to the report from Cincinnati.com. Procter & Gamble did not immediately respond to DCNF's request for comment. Procter & Gamble's growth in the PRC was the greatest of all years reported, up 22% since 2016, according to the report. In July 2021, Procter & Gamble submitted a written statement to the CACC in defense of its sponsorship of the Olympics and human rights record, writing that where we operate, respecting human rights is fundamental to how we manage our business, before outlining the company's commitment to Olympic athletes, the Olympic movement, LGBTQIA+ athletes, women and girls in sports, and human rights. Procter & Gamble didn't mention Uyghurs or East Turkestan, so-called Xinjiang, in its letter to Congress. The DCNF reached out to activists within the Uyghur diaspora for comment on the corporate reactions to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the Uyghur genocide. Dr. Memtimin Allah, an author of The Worse Than Death, Reflections on the Uyghur Genocide, and the European representative of the unrecognized East Turkestan Government-in-Exile, said that disparity in response indicates a selective version of justice. The Ukraine crisis has sadly shown to the Uyghurs the two faces of humanity. One is caring and the other is indifferent, Ella told the DCNF. Actually, it's just one face, which is selective in its application of justice to different peoples for different reasons. Salih Hudayar, the elected Prime Minister of East Turkestan Government-in-Exile. To date, over 320 companies across the world have either terminated or curtailed their business operations in Russia in protest of invasion of Ukraine, Hudayar told the DCNF. Yet, many of these companies continue to do business, either directly or through joint ventures, in East Turkestan despite the ongoing genocide of Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples by Communist China. Suffice to say, we are repulsed by the rank hypocrisy of these corporations, all of whom pay lip service to human rights when convenient. But as soon as upholding human rights hurts their bottom line, they quickly turn a blind eye to Communist China's ongoing genocide in East Turkestan. Hudayar said, thus, we call upon the corporate world to prove that their concern for human life isn't region-specific, but rather universal. Iltaber from East Turkestan TV News reported.